So today I'm going to clone a piece of clothing out of my own wardrobe, and it's going to be this button-up t-shirt that my friend gave to me when she was doing a wardrobe clean out. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to remove the collar at the top and the yoke at the back, so I just simplified it quite a bit to make it a lot easier on myself. So what you're going to need for this is obviously the piece of clothing you want to clone, scissors, pencil, ruler, and this is my French curve ruler, paper and sticky tape. So I didn't actually show how I trace the pattern from the shirt onto the paper, but I promise I'll do that in my next one because I was not actually in my studio when I did this. I was at my sewing group. So essentially, here are my pieces ready to go. Now this is my fabric. I chose some of my own Frida fabric. You'll need your rotary cutter, washable eraser, and get going. Just cut out your pieces. So here I'm cutting out the front and the back. So there's two front pieces, one big large back piece, and then while I was cutting out I realized that I might want 4 pieces for the tie instead of 2, just because when you tie it up you'll be able to see the white on the back of the fabric, and I didn't want that. So once you've got your pieces out, iron. So here you see me folding down the button placket. Usually I would have used interfacing, but because the fabric was pretty strong, I decided not to use it this time around. But if you're using a lighter fabric, definitely use interfacing when you're doing your button plackets. Still ironing, so much ironing. Oh geez. All right, so I'm pinning these together, the ties, and I'm gonna sew them with my overlocker. And then I'm just gonna sew them with my normal machine using a straight stitch, and I'm using a white thread as well. Sewing time lapse. I'll just wait. All right, so my ties are done, and the next step is turning them inside out. So I'm just gonna fasten this up here because it's a pretty bloody boring step. All right, here we go. Okay, done. I wish I could work that fast. So I'm top stitching now, and I'm using a black thread to top stitch my seams to make it nice and pretty. Next up, lay your back piece on top of your 2 front pieces, right sides together, and pin at the shoulder seam. Pin your side seams as well. And then sew. I'm just using a straight stitch, and the stitch length is at about 3, I think, on my machine. Alright, so don't forget to overlock your seams, and if you didn't have an overlocker you could just use a zigzag stitch on your normal sewing machine. So in this next part I'm sewing down the button placket, and basically I've folded it once and then twice and then pressed it down with my iron, and now I'm just sewing it down to attach it properly. Okay, so the next step now is to attach your bias binding. I'm going to be doing mine around the neck hole and the sleeve hole. And so I'm just eyeballing it here and measuring it just to see roughly how much I need, and then cutting it out, pinning it all the way around the neck hole and the armholes. And then I'm sewing that on right sides together with my sewing machine. here is what it looks like with the binding sewn on. The next thing I'm going to do is to clip carefully around the curves with my scissors, just to give the fabric a little bit of movement and stretch. And then I'm going to fold the bias binding down on the back side of the fabric and pin it down. And then I sew that completely all the way around the neck and the armholes until the binding is attached. Once you get up to this stage, it's always good to try on what you've been making, just to double check that it looks okay, it fits in all the right places, there's nothing you need to really change before you do all the finishing touches. So I'm pretty happy with how this looks at the moment. It sits quite nicely, so I'm ready to move on to the finishing touches. So here I'm just kind of fiddling around with everything, trying to work out my next step. Eventually I decide to overlock all the way around the bottom hem, including that little kind of keyhole part, so it's ready for when I want to attach the ties. What you want to do is go ahead and fold your hem over once, twice, then sew it down. So the curves on this part was a little bit tricky, and there was a fair bit of swearing occurring in my studio as I tried to get this hem down, but with a little bit of coaxing it worked and it looks fine. Trim off any excess threads, and now you're ready for the next part. That's my dog snoring in the background. Should I leave that in? Alright, so next up is attaching the ties. So I just basically pin them right sides together and sewed straight along the seam. Okay, so now I'm pretty much up to the finishing touches, which is adding buttons. So I'm going to pick my colors. So I picked a yellow for this one and space them out evenly. I also use a ruler to help me mark where they need to go. Pop that down, pop the mark down with my erasable marker, and then jump on over to my sewing machine to sew the buttonholes. So make sure you are snipping off any excess threads as you go along, and then grab your unpicker to open up your buttonholes. Be very careful when you're doing this. You don't want to accidentally cut too far on either end and cut through the stitches of your buttonhole. So next, lay one side with the buttonholes on top of the other side of your front shirt and mark with your pen where your buttons need to be hand sewn. Sew them on, and then that's it. This is where you'd probably add your label if you had one, but done. So next time I will probably change the way I finish the tie, because I'm not too happy with the way it sits. And I'd also change, I think the fabric would be much nicer in a softer fabric, more drapey. It's quite structured. It's quite a structured cotton, so it's very bulky, but let's have a look, see what it looks like on. Not too bloody bad. Hey, let me know what you think in the comments below. I 100% will be wearing this, I reckon. Yeah, it's nice. Go me. Alright, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please do. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.